Hello, I'm Michael Francis, music director of the Mainly Mozart Festival. I'm here with another episode of Listening with the Maestro. Here in the grounds of Eton College, just behind me, I thought it'd be appropriate to discuss a quintessentially English piece of music, the Serenade for Strings by Sir Edward Elgar. Written in 1892, this is one of his very first masterpieces, and a piece that seems to perfectly encapsulate that whimsical nobility that we associate with English music. That sense of calm, that sense of sentimentality perhaps. But really there's an awful lot more here than meets the eye. Elgar was a deeply complicated man, and at this period, which is often deemed to be the golden age of England, all you fans of Downton Abbey will of course attest to enjoying the grand homes, that sense of all being well with the world, and Dame Maggie Smith's marvellous witticisms as the Dowager. But for Elgar, he had a desire to be part of the high society. He was not born in the wealthy classes, and this was complicated because he always wanted to be accepted. Unfortunately, in England at the time, and even to a point still today, there is still a perniciously clear class system, which is not always easy to scale up and down. Where Mozart could do that rather easily in Vienna, if you're good, you can make it work. It's not always so straightforward for him, particularly at the time in England. So despite his rather stiff appearance, he was a man of deep complications, a man of deep emotions. His first symphony, which was written some years later, really sums up that. It's almost Mahlerian in the way that it shows the various aspects of his personality, from the hope, the nobility, the beauty, to the deep, dark torment, as you can sense, especially when the music goes into the minor key. It really feels like we're watching somebody almost with a split personality. It was described that he could go from being the life and soul of the party to suddenly descending into a suicidal depression at the drop of a hat. Perhaps that's why the Enigma variations are so important for him, because it allows him to represent in music, incarnate, all the people who helped him through his various trials and tribulations. So the Serenade for Strings is something more simple. It begins with this sort of pulsating Siciliana rhythm in the violas. But the music that comes out in the E minor key, it doesn't really feel like a theme. It feels more like a sigh, a deep sort of guttural longing. And the music, even though it's just for strings, has this more profound nature. It feels innocent, but there's something else going on with it as well. And if you think of what was going on at the time in French music, I mean, Claude Debussy was writing Prélude d'après-midi d'enfant, and this idea of consciousness and the stream of consciousness and that sort of moment between sleep and being awake. In Germany, of course, we had Expressionism, where the idea of your subjective emotional experience could just burst out and change the world around you. The most classic example is by the Norwegian painter Edvard Munch, which we of course know, the Scream, in which the scream seems to distort the landscape around him. Well, here in this piece for Elgar, it's not quite so complicated. It feels more like someone trying to show his outward exterior, this carefully cultivated, stiff upper lip, moustached Brit. But underneath, there is something really much stronger. In the second movement, he starts to bear himself more profoundly. I find that the melody, which seems to rise up but always cascades down at the end, is reaching, it's searching. And then it has a moment of stillness as we just find ourselves prone on a single G natural in the violins before this heart-renderingly beautiful melody, one of the greatest melodies ever written, just emits out of the strings. And it just melts us as this man who seems so formal just lays bare and shows us something which, where did it come from? And towards the end of the second movement, then we find ourselves almost in French music as we seem to be sailing down the Thames, sort of three men in a boat, him longing for friendship perhaps. I don't know. I mean, it's up to you what you want it to be. But there is something really almost magical, not real, about the ending of the second movement before we dissipate gently. When the third movement begins, it's the it's slightly more optimistic, but not really. And eventually we find ourselves back at the very, very beginning. And to me, this piece feels like you're walking alongside someone talking, and you have a very, very clear impression of who they are. But then they sort of lay bare some profound aspect of themselves. And you kind of capture yourself thinking, did they just say that? And then you find yourself back at the beginning where you were in the walk. You're changed, and the person walks off, and you understand something about the person and yourself. And T.S. Eliot sums it up the best in Little Gidding, which is the last of his 4 quartets. He said, "What we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from." I love this piece, as I said, because it was one of the first that I ever conducted. I love it for its beauty, but I love it for its reminder not to judge people. Because when we see the picture of Elgar, we think formal Brit, we think land of hope and glory, we think graduation, we think pomp and circumstance. But when we hear the music, we see something so honest, so touching and so tender. And to me that feels such an important message. Mahler wears his heart on the sleeve. Elgar does, but his sleeve has got very carefully manicured cufflinks on it, as if to try to show you that indeed publicly he's one thing, but privately he may be another. I hope you enjoyed. There's many wonderful recordings of Elgar's Serenade for Strings. You'll find plenty of them on Spotify or whatever your tipple is for listening to music. Have a gin and tonic, or maybe a glass of sherry, or even a cup of tea will probably suffice, and enjoy this wonderful piece of music. Thank you.